March 8, 1971, Media, Pennsylvania, 10:00 p.m. While America watches the fight of the century, Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier in the boxing ring, 8 citizen activists are breaking into an FBI office. They're not professional thieves. They're a taxi driver, a college professor, a social worker, 2 parents, a graduate student, and a daycare center director. They call themselves the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI. They picked this night deliberately. With Ali and Frazier fighting, the nation's attention is elsewhere. Police are stretched thin. The FBI office in Media, a small satellite field office, has only a single lock on the door. It takes them less than 30 minutes to break in. Inside, they find filing cabinets full of documents. They take everything, over 1,000 pages. FBI surveillance files, investigation reports, operational memos. They haul it all out in suitcases and drive away. Then they disappear. 2 weeks later, on March 24th, packets begin arriving at major newspapers: The Washington Post, The New York Times, Los Angeles Times. Inside are photocopied FBI documents marked COINTELPRO. The reporters have no idea what COINTELPRO means. Then they start reading. The documents reveal that the FBI has been running a secret domestic intelligence program, not just surveillance, not just monitoring. Active operations to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize American citizens. The targets: civil rights leaders, anti-war activists, Black Panthers, feminist groups, environmental organizations. Anyone the FBI deemed subversive. The methods: infiltration, wiretapping, anonymous letters, forged documents, planting false media stories, blackmail, and, in at least one case, assassination. The man who authorized it all, J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI for 48 years, the most powerful unelected official in Washington, the man presidents feared, the man no one could fire. For 15 years, from 1956 to 1971, COINTELPRO operated in complete secrecy. 2,000 organizations infiltrated, thousands of lives destroyed. All in the name of national security. Then, on March 8, 1971, 8 ordinary Americans decided enough was enough. They broke into an FBI office. They stole the files. They exposed COINTELPRO to the world, and they got away with it. The FBI never caught them. Their identities remained secret for 43 years. This is the story of COINTELPRO. Not conspiracy theory, documented fact. The files are public. You can read them yourself. This is what your government did to Americans who disagreed, and how citizen heroes stopped it. To understand COINTELPRO, you must understand J. Edgar Hoover. May 10, 1924, 29-year-old J. Edgar Hoover becomes director of the Bureau of Investigation, the agency that would later become the FBI. He holds this position for 48 years, until his death in 1972, 48 years. That's 8 presidents: Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, all came and went. J. Edgar Hoover remained. Why? Because Hoover knew how to accumulate power. And how to keep it. From the beginning, Hoover understood one principle: information is leverage. Know everyone's secrets, keep files on everyone, then no one can touch you. By the 1950s, Hoover's FBI had compiled secret files on thousands of Americans: politicians, judges, journalists, celebrities, civil rights leaders, anyone with influence. The files contained everything: extramarital affairs, financial troubles, embarrassing associations, political beliefs, sexual orientation, anything that could be used as blackmail. Presidents wanted to fire Hoover. They couldn't. He had files on them too. In the 1950s, Hoover built his reputation fighting communism. The Red Scare was at its peak. Senator Joseph McCarthy was conducting witch hunts. Americans were terrified of Soviet infiltration. Hoover exploited this fear brilliantly. He positioned the FBI as America's defender, against communist subversion. Any dissent, any protest, any challenge to authority could be labeled communist-inspired. And Hoover's FBI would investigate, but by the mid-1950s, Hoover faced a problem. The Communist Party USA was small and largely irrelevant. The Soviet threat, while real internationally, wasn't manifesting as domestic terrorism. Hoover needed enemies. Without enemies, his power would diminish, so he found new ones, civil rights activists. On December 1, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama, bus. The Montgomery bus boycott began. Martin Luther King Jr., a 26-year-old Baptist minister, emerged as a leader. Hoover watched, and he grew alarmed. The civil rights movement was organizing Black Americans, challenging segregation, demanding equality. This, to Hoover, looked like revolution. In August 1956, Hoover launched COINTELPRO. The name stands for Counterintelligence Program. It was presented internally as a program to counter communist infiltration of American political groups, but the real target wasn't communism. It was dissent. COINTELPRO's stated mission, in Hoover's own words, expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize groups and individuals deemed threats to national security. Neutralize, not arrest, not prosecute, neutralize. The first COINTELPRO was aimed at the Communist Party USA. This was, on paper, a legitimate counterintelligence operation. Soviet intelligence was using the Communist Party to recruit spies, but COINTELPRO quickly expanded. By 1960, Hoover had created multiple COINTELPRO operations. COINTELPRO **, Communist Party USA, COINTELPRO SWP, Socialist Workers' Party, COINTELPRO White Hate Groups, Ku Klux Klan. American Nazi Party, COINTELPRO New Left *, Students for a Democratic Society, Anti-War Movement, COINTELPRO Black Nationalist Hate Groups, Black Panthers, Nation of Islam. Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That last category is where things got dark. Black nationalist hate groups included the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That's Martin Luther King Jr.'s organization. In Hoover's worldview, Martin Luther King Jr., nonviolent civil rights leader, Baptist minister, Nobel Peace Prize winner, was a threat to national security. Why? Because King challenged authority. He led protests. He inspired Black Americans to demand equality. To Hoover, this was subversion. On October 23, 1963, Hoover authorized wiretaps on Martin Luther King Jr.'s home and office. The surveillance was justified as investigating communist infiltration of the civil rights movement, but the FBI found no evidence of communist ties. King wasn't a communist. His advisors weren't Soviet agents. The whole premise was false, but the wiretaps continued because Hoover had discovered something else. Martin Luther King Jr. had extramarital affairs. And Hoover decided to use that information to destroy him. November 21, 1964, a package arrives at Martin Luther King Jr.'s address in Atlanta. Inside is an audio tape and an anonymous letter. The tape allegedly contains recordings of King's sexual indiscretions, captured by FBI wiretaps. King's wife, Coretta Scott King, would later say the tape was mostly mumbo-jumbo, unclear and unconvincing. The letter is typed, no signature, no return address. It reads, "King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. You are a colossal fraud and an evil, vicious one at that. The American public, the church organizations that have been helping, Protestant, Catholic, and Jews will know you for what you are, an evil, abnormal beast. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. The meaning is clear: commit suicide." The package was mailed 34 days before King was scheduled to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, Norway, Martin Luther King Jr. immediately suspected the FBI sent it. He was right. The letter was written by William C. Sullivan, Deputy Director of the FBI's Domestic Intelligence Division, under J. Edgar Hoover's direction. The FBI, America's premier law enforcement agency, had sent a letter urging a Nobel Peace Prize winner to kill himself. King did not comply. He accepted the Nobel Prize on December 10, 1964. In his acceptance speech, he said, "I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him." But Hoover's FBI didn't stop. Between 1963 and 1968, the FBI wiretapped King's phones constantly, recording thousands of hours of conversations. Placed microphones in King's hotel rooms across the country, attempting to capture embarrassing recordings. Sent anonymous letters to King's wife suggesting he was unfaithful. Leaked information to journalists to damage King's reputation. Briefed government officials with false or misleading information about King's alleged communist ties. Attempted to block King's audience with the Pope during a 1964 visit to Rome. Tried to prevent King from receiving honorary degrees from universities. Worked to undermine fundraising for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. All of this was coordinated from FBI headquarters. All of it was approved by J. Edgar Hoover. The goal, stated explicitly in FBI memos, was to neutralize King as an effective civil rights leader. To destroy his reputation, to isolate him from supporters, to break him, but King survived. He continued organizing. He led the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965. He opposed the Vietnam War in 1967. He planned the Poor People's Campaign for 1968. And then, on April 4, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. James Earl Ray, a career criminal, was arrested and convicted of the murder. The FBI conducted the investigation into King's assassination. This created an obvious problem. The agency that had spent years trying to destroy King was now tasked with finding his killer. Was the FBI involved in King's assassination? No credible evidence suggests they were. Ray acted alone or with minimal assistance. But the FBI's prior campaign against King raised the question: did the FBI create an atmosphere where King's murder seemed acceptable? In 1976, the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigated. They concluded the FBI's COINTELPRO campaign against Dr. King was marked by extreme personal vindictiveness. The FBI's efforts to undermine Dr. King had a purpose: to neutralize him politically. There is no question that the FBI's treatment of Dr. King was shameful. The MLK suicide letter wasn't discovered until 1975, 7 years after King's death, when the Church Committee investigated FBI abuses. The full letter wasn't published until 2014, when historian Beverly Gage found it in J. Edgar Hoover's confidential files at the National Archives. When the letter was finally made public, Americans were shocked. The FBI, the agency they trusted, had tried to drive Martin Luther King Jr. to suicide, but King wasn't the only target. COINTELPRO went after hundreds of organizations and thousands of individuals, and in at least one case, it resulted in murder. December 4, 1969, 4:30 a.m., Chicago, Illinois. 14 plainclothes police officers from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office surround an apartment at 2337 West Monroe Street. Inside, 9 people are sleeping. Among them, Fred Hampton, 21-year-old chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, and his pregnant fiancée, Deborah Johnson, later known as Acua Njeri. The police are armed with shotguns, a Thompson submachine gun, and a .45 caliber pistol. They claim they're serving a search warrant for illegal weapons. At 4:45 a.m., the police kick down the door and open fire. In the next 10 minutes, police fire between 90 and 99 bullets into the apartment. The occupants fire once, a single shot from Mark Clark's shotgun, likely fired reflexively as Clark was shot in the chest. When the shooting stops, 2 Black Panthers are dead, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. 4 others are wounded, 3 are arrested. The police claim self-defense. They say the Panthers opened fire first, forcing them to return fire in a shootout. But the physical evidence tells a different story. Journalists and activists examine the apartment. They find bullet holes everywhere, walls, ceilings, furniture. Almost all the bullet trajectories point inward. The police shot into the apartment. The Panthers didn't shoot back. The Chicago Tribune publishes a police photograph showing bullet holes in the doorframe. Proof, police say, that Panthers fired at them. But reporters inspect the door in person. Those aren't bullet holes, they're nail holes used to hang posters. The police lied. Then the truth gets worse. Fred Hampton's fiancée, Deborah Johnson, tells attorney Jeffrey Haas what happened. She was 8 months pregnant, sleeping next to Fred when the raid began. The shooting woke her. Police dragged her from the bedroom. She heard Fred Hampton's voice. He said, "I think I've been shot." Then she heard 2 gunshots. An officer said, "He's good and dead now." Fred Hampton was executed in his bed, shot twice in the head at point-blank range. Ballistics later confirmed Hampton was killed by shots fired from inside the bedroom while he was likely unconscious or incapacitated. Why was Fred Hampton targeted? He was chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, but more importantly, he was a bridge builder. In 1969, Hampton created the Rainbow Coalition, an alliance between the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican activist group, and the Young Patriots, a group of poor white Appalachians in Chicago. Hampton preached unity across racial lines. He said, "We're going to fight racism not with racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity." He organized free breakfast programs feeding thousands of Chicago children. He negotiated gang truces. He gave speeches that drew hundreds. At 21, Fred Hampton was becoming one of the most effective organizers in the Black Panther Party. Edgar Hoover called the Black Panthers the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. In an internal FBI memo, Hoover stated the goal was to prevent the rise of a black messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. Fred Hampton fit that description. So the FBI decided to neutralize him. In 1968, the FBI recruited William O'Neill, a car thief facing felony charges, to infiltrate the Black Panthers. O'Neill agreed in exchange for dropped charges and a monthly stipend of $300. O'Neill quickly rose in the organization. He became Hampton's bodyguard and director of chapter security for the Illinois Black Panthers. He had access to everything. O'Neill reported directly to FBI Special Agent Roy Mitchell. He provided the FBI with detailed information on Panther activities, plans, and locations. In November 1969, O'Neill drew a detailed floor plan of Fred Hampton's apartment. He marked where Hampton slept. On December 3, 1969, the night before the raid, O'Neill drugged Fred Hampton's drink with a powerful barbiturate. During the raid, Hampton never woke up. Witnesses said he appeared unconscious or heavily sedated. He didn't resist. He didn't fight. He was asleep when police shot him. The floor plan and the drugging weren't coincidences. FBI documents, discovered years later, proved the FBI planned the raid with Chicago police. O'Neill provided the floor plan. The FBI shared it with police. The drugging ensured Hampton wouldn't resist. It was a coordinated assassination. Initially, the 7 surviving Panthers were charged with attempted murder of police officers. But the charges were eventually dropped when evidence emerged that police had lied about the shootout. In 1970, the families of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark filed a civil lawsuit. The case dragged on for 12 years. In 1982, the court found that the FBI, the Chicago Police Department, and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office had conspired to deprive Hampton of his civil rights. The court awarded $1.85 million to the families, a rare admission of government wrongdoing. Fred Hampton was 21 when he died. His son, Fred Hampton Jr., was born 26 days later. Hampton's fiancée had been 8 months pregnant during the raid. Fred Hampton's assassination wasn't an isolated incident. It was COINTELPRO in action: expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize. When neutralization meant murder, the FBI facilitated it. By 1970, COINTELPRO had been operating for 14 years. The FBI had infiltrated thousands of organizations. Thousands of Americans had been targeted, but almost no one knew. COINTELPRO was classified, top secret. Then came March 8, 1971, the media Pennsylvania break-in. The 8 members of the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI were not professional activists. They were ordinary people who believed the FBI was abusing its power. John and Bonnie Raines were a married couple and professors at Temple University in Philadelphia. Keith Forsyth was a taxi driver. Bill Davidson was a physics professor at Haverford College. They planned the burglary for months. They surveilled the FBI office. They practiced lockpicking. They chose March 8th deliberately, the night of the Ali Frazier fight, knowing police would be distracted. The burglary went smoothly. They took over 1,000 documents. They drove to a farm. They spent days sorting through files, photocopying key documents. Then they mailed copies to journalists and members of Congress. The Washington Post received documents first. Reporter Betty Metzger got the packet. She read the files and immediately understood their significance. The documents showed the FBI was spying on ordinary citizens, college students, anti-war activists, civil rights groups. The FBI was infiltrating organizations, disrupting meetings, sending anonymous letters, and everywhere in the files was one word: COINTELPRO. Metzger called the FBI for comment. The FBI demanded the documents back. They threatened prosecution, but Washington Post editor Ben Bradley made a decision: publish. On March 24, 1971, the Washington Post ran the story. It made front-page news. Other newspapers followed. The FBI launched a massive investigation. They called it MEDBURG for Media, Pennsylvania Burglary. Over 200 FBI agents worked the case. They investigated 18,000 potential suspects. They never caught anyone. The 8 burglars simply disappeared. They went back to their normal lives. For 43 years, their identities remained secret. In 2014, John and Bonnie Raines, Keith Forsyth, Bill Davidson, who had died in 2013, and others finally revealed themselves in a book, *1971, A Year of Change. By then, the statute of limitations had expired. They couldn't be prosecuted. When asked why they did it, John Raines said, "When we broke in, we thought there was a good chance we'd end up spending years in prison. But we also knew that if we didn't do it, nobody would." Their burglary changed America. The stolen documents forced Congress to investigate. In 1975, Senator Frank Church of Idaho chaired the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, known as the Church Committee. The Church Committee investigated CIA, FBI, NSA, and military intelligence abuses. The hearings were televised. Americans watched in horror as the truth emerged. The FBI had sent 500,000 letters attempting to disrupt organizations, conducted 2,370 covert operations against domestic groups, used 2,000 informants to infiltrate organizations, planted false news stories. In media outlets, burglarized homes and offices without warrants, sent forged letters to destroy marriages and relationships, Senator Frank Church said. The United States government has engaged in actions which would have made the Founding Fathers weep. The Church Committee's final report concluded that COINTELPRO was a sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association. In 1976, Attorney General Edward Levi issued guidelines restricting FBI domestic intelligence operations. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, was passed in 1978, requiring warrants for domestic surveillance. COINTELPRO officially ended in 1971, shortly after the media burglary exposed it. But its effects lingered. Activists remained paranoid, justifiably, that the government was watching. Movements struggled with infiltration fears, trust broke down, and J. Edgar Hoover. He died on May 2, 1972, at age 77. He never faced prosecution. He was buried with full honors. Most of the truth about COINTELPRO emerged only after his death, when he could no longer suppress it. Today, more than 50 years after COINTELPRO ended, its legacy remains deeply troubling. For 15 years, the FBI treated American citizens as enemies. It targeted civil rights leaders, anti-war activists, and political dissidents. It used illegal surveillance, blackmail, infiltration, and in Fred Hampton's case, assassination, all in the name of national security. But here's what's undeniable: Martin Luther King Jr. was not a communist. Fred Hampton was not a terrorist. The Students for a Democratic Society were not Soviet agents. They were Americans exercising First Amendment rights: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances. And the FBI decided that made them enemies. COINTELPRO is not ancient history. Its victims are still alive. Fred Hampton's son, Fred Hampton Jr., continues his father's activism. Deborah Johnson, renamed Acua Njeri, has spoken publicly about the raid for decades. In 2014, when the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI finally revealed their identities, they were hailed as heroes. No prosecution was pursued. But the question remains: could COINTELPRO happen again? After 9/11, domestic surveillance expanded dramatically. The USA Patriot Act granted broad surveillance powers. The NSA collected metadata on millions of Americans. Activists, particularly Muslim Americans and Black Lives Matter organizers, report infiltration and surveillance reminiscent of COINTELPRO. The tools have changed, the justifications have changed, but the impulse remains: when the government fears dissent, it suppresses dissent. COINTELPRO's lesson is simple: power without oversight leads to abuse. Even well-intentioned agencies can become tools of oppression. Even dedicated public servants can commit injustices when they believe the ends justify the means. The Church Committee reforms, FISA courts, FBI guidelines, congressional oversight helped. But they're not perfect. Surveillance continues. Abuse continues. The citizens who broke into the media FBI office understood something profound. Sometimes democracy requires civil disobedience. Sometimes breaking the law is necessary to expose injustice. They risked prison to expose COINTELPRO, and they won. The files are public. The truth is documented. And the warning is clear: eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. COINTELPRO happened, it was real, and it must never be forgotten.